How is everybody doing today? If you're joining me live in the chat, as always, let me know that you're here. All right, we got Antifa Duck with us, as always, doing the intro. Let's get the intro music turned down for a second here. There we go. I, of course, am Jimmy Ruffian, doing the Ruff Report live from here in downtown Toronto, where I just got my first Pfizer vaccine today at about 12, quarter to 1. I got it's about the time I got it. So far, I feel like my arm is starting to get a bit tender, and I'm feeling a little I don't know. I don't know if I'm just tired in general, or I'm feeling tired because of that, or it's psychosomatic. I don't know. But it does feel good to finally get that out of the way. So once again, thank you for joining us. We had a pretty busy live stream last week. I was kind of impressed and shocked, actually, at how popular that was. I'm not sure, why that went so well, but it was better than usual. I mean, by this show's standards, we had a lot of viewers. Okay, so we got some things to talk about today, of course. I'm going to talk a little bit about Biden's recent speech to Congress, where he said some pretty good things that were surprising for Biden, and some, pretty typical things that you would expect from any neoliberal conservative leader. So it's kind of, I guess it was a little bit status quo in a lot of ways, and a little bit not in a lot of other ways. So we'll expand on that a little bit. I guess we might as well get right to it here. Where did I put that? Oh yeah, I had it in a separate window. Hey. Okay, had some time points marked down here. I was watching this a little earlier on double speed. I'm trying to get used to that because it does save a lot of time, but it's also sort of distracting in that it can be sort of hilarious to watch, especially we got here, let me get the display back up. We got, Harris and Pelosi in the background there, and watching them just clap really fast. I just found myself going hee hee hee. But now I got it set to normal time again. So what was some of the things I had listed here? All right. First of all, this kind of typical stuff. This is stuff that I feel like it's so accepted and so normal that it doesn't even clock on our radar as being kind of creepy and weird. And I think this is just one of those things that when you hear stuff like this, you should kind of instead of going, yes, that's something the president would say, we should maybe question it a little bit more. Here's what I'm talking about.
The International Monetary Fund is now estimating our economy will grow at a rate of more than 6% this year. That will be the fastest pace of economic growth in this country in nearly 4 decades. America's moving forward, but we can't stop now. We're in competition with China and other countries to win the 21st century. We're at a great inflection point in history. We have to do more than just build back better. We have to build back better. We have to compete more strenuously than we have.
This sort of stuff, right? This particular brand of nationalism, I guess, in that, we have to compete. these other countries that might be doing all right is a threat to us. Um, why? I just don't get why this is the normal mentality. When like when it just hits my brain in my like lizard brain cortex, it's like why are we competing if they're doing really well? Uh, shouldn't we be trying to work together? Isn't cooperation a little bit more um, important than the alternative? I don't know. Seems very weird to me. Doomer. I don't know what you mean about Doomer. I would love for you to expand on that there, Brent. What you mean by Doomer in that capacity? I don't regard myself as a Doomer. That's me. Not exactly what you might say is black pilled. No, I'm pretty optimistic, or at least I'd like to be. So yeah, like when you're talking about like, yeah, we got to compete and beat these other countries and stuff like that. It's like at what? It just living our lives, being happy. Like this is purely a like it just it's rooted in and comes from a capitalistic mindset because it has to, right? The idea of competition making us better, but it becomes obvious, especially even at other points in the speech. You might think, well, you know, is competition better? Because it seems like there's a lot of drawbacks to this idea of emphasizing competition over cooperation, right? Uh, but on a good note, what's about at that point? There's some good improvements, emphasis on the things that we need to cooperate on in order to be successful. I just wish there was a bit more of an emphasis on that, I guess.
Health. American Jobs Plan creates jobs replacing 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines so every American can drink clean water.
Right? Investment in infrastructure. That's good stuff. Way freaking late. I've mentioned it a few times on this show in the past, and I think it's always worth mentioning again that the people of Flint, Michigan now essentially have a large population of an entire generation that has brain damage and neurological deficiencies. And, that's going to have lasting consequences on that area, those people, their families. It's great that this is an emphasis and they want to replace all the lead pipe systems. It obviously needs to be done, but, just a little frustrating that this has been going on in Flint for, 20, 30 years? The era of big government has come. I mean, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say, and I find a lot of people origami in the YouTube chat there. I find a lot of people have a pretty wide definition of what big big government is. Yeah, Michigan is run by Dems, in even in Obama's time. They didn't do anything about Flint. That was a massive failure and an example of the overemphasis on the Democrats' part on advancing neoliberal policies and leaning to the right than to, actually do stuff that helps people. But yeah, in general, I find when people talk about big government, that can mean a lot of things, both valid and not. But it's one of those terms that I just when I hear it, I don't immediately know what that person is talking about. Anyway, so yeah, great that there's an emphasis on infrastructure. He goes on to talk a lot more about infrastructure there, but I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Okay, yeah. And then again, kind of bouncing back to one of my points before where it's like, yeah, he says something pretty like, hey, that was better than what I was expecting to hear from Biden. You know, replacing 100% of water pipes. Cool. Was not expecting that given, you know, the Democrats' track record. You certainly don't expect a Republican or anybody that far to the right to do something about infrastructure a whole lot. So great. But then, you know, they say stuff like this.
And create jobs for our caregivers with better wages and better benefits, continuing a cycle of growth. For too long, we've failed to use the most important word
this part
when it comes to meeting the climate crisis. Jobs.
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 Why is, like, it's an important word to address the climate crisis. It's a good thing to point out that there can be an economic incentive to it. But it's just strange to me that that's emphasized as the most important word in the climate change problem. You know, the most important word not being, you know, human lives or, you know, like impending disaster, you know, things getting worse for humanity as a whole. No, we don't want to, you know, paint that picture of being all this, being in this all together too much. Jobs. That's the most important part. You know, in terms of playing politics, I guess I unfortunately sort of understand it in that it's going to get some people on the more Republican side or the more right-wing Democrat side to do something about it, or maybe start nodding their heads about it a little bit more. That'd be nice. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. What evidence is there of a climate crisis? That is a hilariously stupid question. I'm sorry, Origami. That is, you're asking me what evidence there is of climate crisis. That's like asking evidence that, you know, Earth is mostly water on the surface. That's like asking evidence that we, you know, revolve around the sun. Asking evidence that 2 plus 2 is 4. Like, you can ask those questions. You could pretend that that's just not a thing. Like, you know, you can think like the stars are just, you know, a black sheet that God puts over the dome of the earth and poked little holes in it so it looks pretty for us as we try and sleep. Like, you could think that if you want, but it doesn't change anything, unfortunately. Sorry.
In this chamber.
Oh, wait, what do we got here? Okay. Yeah, and again, some bit of bouncing back to good stuff. It's like, as I was watching this, it was like, ooh, good advancement, progressive, pro-worker sort of attitude. And then, you know, like falling back into like neoliberal conservatism. It was like this up and down. He was taking us on a roller coaster, you know?
Associate's degree. The American Jobs Plan is a blue-collar blueprint to build America. That's what it is. And it recognizes something I've always said in this chamber and the other. Good guys and women on Wall Street, but Wall Street didn't build this country. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. So that's why I'm calling on Congress.
He's certainly not wrong there. He's 100% not wrong.
Protect the right to organize.
He is missing one important point, though, that I should emphasize and go a little further back in American history. That what ultimately built the possibility of the middle class and the what bolstered the fast economic growth of the United States was slavery. So it was, slavery built the middle class, and then I guess you could say, in turn, the middle class built the American ideal, the American dream, that sort of almost fictionalized ideal history of America that we collectively as a society like to try and project. That. Anyway, that's I think it was a good thing. Like not enough. I haven't seen political leaders say something that outwardly pro-worker, in a position of actual power. Like you had Senator Sanders saying this a lot, and he's in a position of actual power, but he's amongst the minority when it comes to that, and let alone for a president of the United States that wasn't 50, 60 years ago saying this stuff is it's good. It feels nice. I don't know, okay, I'm not going to get into that point yet. I want him to talk a little bit more.
Plan before we got into the deep discussions. I'd like to meet with those who have ideas that are different, they think are better. I welcome those ideas. But the rest of the world is not waiting for us. I just want to be clear. From my perspective, doing nothing is not an option.
America did not build a war machine strong enough to defeat Hitler 80 years after abolishing slavery. That didn't happen. America did not defeat Hitler. So, Origami in the YouTube chat, that is factually incorrect.
Look, we can't be so busy competing with one another that we forget the competition that we have with the rest of the world to win the 21st century. Secretary Blinken can tell you, I spent a lot of time with President Xi. Traveled over 17,000.
President Xi Jinping, I assume, is what he's referring to there, the president of China.
Miles with him. Spent, they tell me, over 24 hours in private discussions with him. When he called to congratulate him, we had a 2-hour discussion. He's deadly earnest about becoming the most significant, consequential nation in the world.
I hate to inform you, but they kind of already are. Like, they own essentially the world's manufacturing sector, and thus their like kind of infrastructural buying power is, I think, much larger than the United States, and it's only going to expand. And again, the idea of emphasis on, like, we have to defeat these people. I just don't get it. It's weird. How come we can't get beyond this sense of nationalistic pride to the detriment of anybody who might be considered economically expendable. That is to say, human lives that should not be considered as such. And the quality of that human life, no less. It's just baffling to me that, the way China is poised, that the emphasis is just on defeat in this kind of background sword rattling. That's sort of like you can just hear it in the hills. You can sort of hear it over the horizon. It's not loud and super upfront and present yet. But that's sort of it's like the Red Scare when the USSR was still active in doing its thing. It kind of echoes of that. While at the same time, he's talking about the positives of ideas that countries like China at least try and represent in terms of emphasis on worker autonomy and worker rights and unionization and a whole slew of other things. I believe anybody who's watched this show before definitely knows I have strong criticism of China, but I'm talking on a more ideological level in what they attempt to project, right? Yeah, I would agree with that, Origami, in the sense of China has a lot of human rights issues. But on the same token, so does the United States. I would posit that the United States, in fact, is not any better in a lot of respects to anything China has done in regards to human rights. And one of my criticisms of China and people who are kind of emphatic China supporters is that, if we're talking about an ideology that attempts to put an emphasis on human rights and worker rights and fails to do so, we have to be honest and address that and be able to express that and unpack it and admit that just because we have this, sort of socialist ideology that is supposed to mean X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean we are incapable of violating human rights. Our ideology does not make that impossible by any degree. We have to be conscious of it and self-critical of it. And that's it's just the way to go. But yeah, anyway, go on here. Yeah, this is one of my favorite points about this, because I think it's like really, at least in my recent memory, hearing somebody in a president-like position say anything that abruptly sort of confronts this issue.
Pay for the plans I propose and will create millions of jobs that will grow the economy and enhance our financial standing in the country. When you hear someone say they don't want to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% or corporate America, ask them whose taxes you want to raise. Instead, whose they're going to cut. Look, the big tax cut of 2017. Remember, it was supposed to pay for itself. That was how it was sold. And generate vast economic growth.
Did not pay for itself.
Instead, it added $2 trillion to the deficit.
Yep.
It was a huge windfall for corporate America.
Yep.
And those at the very top.
Yep.
Instead of using the tax saving to raise wages and invest in research and development, it poured billions of dollars into the pockets of CEOs.
Just like we said it would.
In fact, the pay gap between CEOs and their workers is now among the largest in history.
Like we've been saying for years.
CEOs make 320 times what the average worker in their corporation makes. It used to be below 100. pandemic has only made things worse. 20
Which
million
goes to show
Americans
capitalism
lost
is
their job
broken.
in the pandemic. Working and middle class America.
If in an economy where working people are suffering and you can basically expand your wealth based on that, like the idea of disaster capitalism and profiteering off of moments of crisis is an emphasis on how the system is broken, fundamentally broken, like in a systemic, rooted in way.
Americans. At the same time, roughly 650 billionaires in America saw their net worth increase by more than $1 trillion in the same exact period. Let me say it again. 650 people increased their wealth by more than $1 trillion during this pandemic.
That's nuts.
And they're now worth more than
nuts.
$4 trillion. My fellow Americans, trickle down. Trickle down economics has never worked. And it's time to grow the economy from the bottom and the middle out.
When you have social safety nets, when you have a basic, sturdy foundation and ground floor for what your bottom floor of humanity looks like, and you build that from the ground up, you're going to come out with a much better result than trying to address it from the most powerful downward. They are never going to address the needs of the people below them. It has to start from down here. And by the way, on an economic level, GDP and the and economic growth very much work this way, where, you know, how a dollar travels from its lowest point to its highest point in all the various ways that money moves around. It does much better when it goes from the bottom up than just kind of floats in the top up here, you know? So let's address some of the things that are happening in the comments here, though. America is the best system for overcoming human problems. That's just goofballs. That's a really goofballs thing to say, because it's fundamentally untrue in a various amount of measurements, considering that the only thing that I believe America is number one in the entire world, actually two things that America is number one in the world and has maintained that prestigious title for many years, is prison population per capita, the number of people that are in prison, and the military spending. America is number one in those two categories. In those two categories only. Everything else, they float, you know, on most important statistics that you would measure the goodness of a country on, they're pretty low in terms of being the wealthiest country on earth. So to think that the particularly American system is the best at solving human problems, never mind what they do on a foreign policy level and the damage that they cause there through imperialism, to say that domestically even America has the best system it's pretty foolish. I'm too hard on America. It has created a great life for many of its citizens and a roadmap for others to achieve wealth in a number of ways. You know, even Karl Marx wrote about that, in how capitalism had certain admirable qualities, and you know, how capitalism is very much exemplified in the growth of the United States. But again, I can only point to the very beginning of capitalism itself. What kicked off the entire system was the slave trade. All historians agree that that was the moment in history where capitalism was basically established and where it grew from and where it expanded from. The American system was built on the back of massive human rights violations, deeply embedded in the very core of what America is. So while you can talk about, and I don't want to ignore that Canada has a very similar history as well. Our hands are definitely not clean in this respect. But if we're talking about America specifically, yeah, we can say that it's made a great life and done a lot of great things for a lot of people. But we cannot ignore the fundamental problems that have come with that. And the other things that Marx wrote about in terms of how capitalism is continuously always doomed to fail itself and collapse in on itself, which we have seen through the increasing number of market crashes over the past few decades. Yeah, infant mortality rate. I think overall mortality rate. I think average age for like life expectancy for a first world country. I think America has one of the lower ones right now. So it's like, yeah, you got to take the good with the bad, and I try and say the same thing to the your more kind of tanky-ish China stands out there. Is that we can point out and be honest about a lot of good things that exist within the Chinese communism, and appreciate those things and unpack and talk about why those things are good. But we also have to be very honest about the things that are bad and the things that they're failing to do. And are the convenient excuses as to why they have failed to do them any different than the convenient excuses that you get from why neoliberalism continues to fail people who live in those regimes? Canada, United States, Britain, France, so on and so on. So yeah, that's basically the part I wanted to cover for the Biden speech. Thank you. Yeah, so no, all in all, if anything, I'm being too fair with America, I think. So yeah, let's get on to Erin O'Toole, the Conservative leader, Conservative Party leader in Canada. No, that's not what I wanted. That's not it. Oh, it's in the other window. That's right. Okay, so I'm going to show you two clips from Erin O'Toole here. This one's fairly recent, just from a few days ago. This story went on, CTV News, titling it Canada on solid footing in negotiations for more AstraZeneca vaccines from the U.S. And here is Erin O'Toole basically, being the opposition. And again, that's one of those weird things that we just say in our politics that seems to go over. It's great that there's opposition to the power that is your prime minister or, whatever the establishment power is that you have in official opposition to it. In theory, that sounds great. But if you're just being the opposition for the sake of being contrarian and not being consistent with what is actually, fact-based and is going to help human beings, then you're not playing on the team. I don't get what being the opposition is supposed to be beneficial towards if that's not what the focus and the goal is. But when it comes to the Tories here in Canada, they just seem to think that being a shitheel is their job. There, let me get the display up here.
We're going to go to Ottawa now. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is speaking
Canadians
to reporters. Let's listen.
Frustrated. Other countries are reopening. Others are being spared from some of the serious risks of this third wave. Last spring, when it was clear that vaccines would be the key tool to turn the page in this crisis, Mr. Trudeau dropped the ball completely. He turned to the communist Chinese regime for a vaccine, and that failed. He failed to secure domestic...
Say the red baiting there, the communist China regime. Like, come on, man. It's nationalistic bullshit.
...production and failed to negotiate early delivery. Cette situation est inacceptable.
This situation is unacceptable in Canada, including for a G7 country. This shouldn't have happened this way. We're here because the Liberals' response was slow at every step of the way.
The Liberal response at every stage has been slow and confused.
To a certain extent, he's right. Yeah, I would agree that the Liberal government and obtaining vaccines and the distribution of those vaccines and having a system in place was less than acceptable for what we are capable of. And that, again, I think it just largely shows a folly in our system, not so much in either of our more dominant parties. It's just a flaw that exists within them. As neoliberalism has progressed, the emphasis on the importance of investing in infrastructure that will save lives in the event of a disaster is less so. I'm not sure what PRC is, or what you might be referring to as PRC.
We are still scrambling to catch.
Sorry, I was responding to a chat question when I said that question.
Out. The Liberal government did not deliver adequate vaccine supply in January and February of this year. Now, only 2.7% of Canadians are fully vaccinated. According to federal government modeling, Canadians cannot expect to begin to reopen until at least 20% of Canadians are fully vaccinated, and 75% have received at least one dose. But the supply of vaccines we are receiving is insufficient to reach this goal before many provinces are scheduled to begin lifting their restrictions. The Prime Minister's failure to secure sufficient vaccine supply led the government to ignore the direction.
That's a really dumb question, Origami. Oh, the go live in China? There's a lot of people that already do that. In fact, there's a lot of Westerners, like, British people, Americans, who do have YouTube channels that are based in China, that are more or less not political either. They're just kind of about living everyday life and things like that. There's people that do that. I'm in Canada, so I try and talk about North American and Canadian issues mostly. But yeah, if you're interested in various perspectives on China that don't necessarily come from the Communist Party of China, there's resources out there that exists, 100%.
Of the vaccine manufacturers and order a 4-month wait time between doses, longer than any other country in the world. We also have no national system of screening and rapid testing that will be critical for a faster, safe reopening. This is perhaps the Prime Minister's greatest failure because...
Again, for the opposition to talk about failures is great, but you'll notice there's something essential missing in this equation as this goes on.
Because he promised this system a year ago. On this current trajectory, Canadians will be facing increased restrictions and lockdowns in multiple provinces, and we will not see restrictions lift in time for summer. Si nous continuons sur cette voie,
if we continue this way with lack of vaccines and rapid testing, Canadians will have to face more severe restrictions, even with a hike of closings across many provinces. And the restrictions will be once again there this summer.
Canada's Conservatives are calling on the government to ensure that every Canadian adult has access to a vaccine by the May long weekend, and that national standards are applied for screening and testing, along with a national supply of the tests.
Okay, so great. You're pushing for those things. You're asking the Liberal government to come up with a plan. What's yours? Do you have one? What suggestions are you making? Are you trying to add anything to this conversation? Are you making suggestions on what the government could do to get more vaccines? Which that is something they're actually getting on. We're going to be getting some from the States, an expansion of AstraZeneca vaccines, I believe. So, yeah. Yeah, like, I'm calling on the government to make a plan and be transparent. Okay, like, any other suggestions that, what that might involve? Anything, and again, anything to add to this conversation other than you don't like what's happening? Like you could say, the one thing that he seems to be suggesting, the one thing that he seems to be leaning on, that he mentioned a couple things throughout that he mentioned it a couple times throughout that clip I noticed, was rapid testing. And I don't know why he thinks an emphasis on rapid testing is a good idea. Maybe that just sounds good. Oh, rapid testing, that sounds fast. But the thing about rapid testing is you have to, several days in a row, get multiple tests that produce a consistent result because they lack accuracy, because they are rapid tests. So there is a lack of efficiency in those. And again, if there's a problem with the supply of rapid tests, why is there a problem with that supply? How did the government fail in preparing for that? What is the underlying problem, Conservatives? I have a strange feeling that a reason why they won't mention the underlying problem there is because it comes down to funding and social safety nets. So when you're talking about an emphasis on social safety nets, that's something the Conservatives don't want to talk about. They just want to talk about how the Liberals are failing, not necessarily why they're failing and how the system is failing, just that they're failing. The shutdowns are not worse than the disease because the shutdowns aren't clogging up the medical system and causing undue harm and death. The shutdowns do the opposite of that. So the Conservative viewpoint on that is stupid. It's not rooted in fact. It's not rooted in anything consistent. It's rooted in trash can ideology. I want my freedom. I don't care what it means. I don't care who has to get hurt. I just want to be free. It's stupid. So, like, when you say in the chat here, I think the Conservative viewpoint is that we can't let the cure, being the shutdowns, be worse than the disease, being COVID, is a fundamentally dumb thing to say. Yeah. Because shutdowns can and do work. The problem is a lot of the ways in how we've conducted them. Because you can look at other countries who did quarantine and shutdown measures, but because they had infrastructure in place in the event of a pandemic or the event of a national emergency that is like that, they had everything ready to go. They operated like a well-oiled machine to get all this stuff out of the way. And guess what? A lot of those countries that were most successful at doing that and nipping this thing in the bud were some of the most socialist countries on earth. That's just a fact. And I don't think conservatives largely seem to notice, because they can't see past themselves and their own minor inconveniences that they're experiencing, that, yeah, if you have a bunch of people in the hospital taking up beds in the ICU and you have no more room in the ICU, if somebody has a heart attack in that neighborhood, if somebody gets in a car accident in that neighborhood, or in the case of Jessica's child having epilepsy and going into a fit and having seizures, they could die because they cannot get access to medical attention, because there's a whole ward of people on ventilators. The problem is not just the virus going around itself. It's the ripple effect and the implications it has on other people, because guess what? We're all in this together, and you cannot escape that fact. You can pretend you're a one-man island of freedom all you like, but you cannot escape the fact that your life, your livelihood, and how you interact with the world is completely interdependent on other human beings, namely the ones in your community. You can't escape that. So, to put further emphasis on how Erin O'Toole is a complete shitheel, and the fact that, you know, he can sit there and say the liberal do bad, all he likes, but he has nothing more to add to the conversation than that, and that is exemplary in this video where he is talking about conservative leader wants Ottawa to improve access to testing, but stops short of calling for an international travel ban. How convenient. This is just the end of January of this year when he's talking.
Perspective.
Oh, here, let me get the video up. Sorry.
And joining me now is Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. He joins us from the foyer of the House of Commons. Mr. O'Toole, happy Friday. Welcome to Power Play. Nice to have you on the show. I'm wondering if you obviously have heard these restrictions, these announcements today. I'm wondering if you think they go far enough and if they come soon enough.
Well, the Prime Minister's talked about them for
I'll get to your question in a second there, Origami. Thank you.
a few weeks now, and he announced them today, but we don't have key tools in this pandemic. Of course, the vaccine story, the number of doses keeps changing every day, and public confidence is shaking. But rapid tests, Joyce, can give us much more flexibility in these situations. If we had that national rollout that we've been asking for months, it gives flexibility on the period of quarantine. Canadians want to.
No, it doesn't. What does that mean? There's nothing there. He's not offering a plan. He's just like, yeah, if we had rapid tests, we could not quarantine. What? No, that's...
And should follow all public health guidance to keep the spread of COVID down, particularly with the new variants. But the period of quarantine could be shorter if we had more use of rapid testing. So we're still going to push for that, but we have to put public health as a paramount consideration.
So I'm not understanding if you're for or against these new measures at the border, banning flights to Mexico and the Caribbean, for instance,
on the point of the conversation.
Quarantines, the obligatory quarantines, the rapid testing, or the testing before people board the flights. Is this enough, or would you have been in favor, for instance, of a total travel ban?
Well, the government needs to say why they picked some areas and not others. Was that because of the inability to test?
Just straight up not answering the question.
I think if we're using testing when people arrive in Canada, that lets them follow public health guidance, perhaps have a 5 to 7 day quarantine, which is what some of our allies and friends are doing around the world by using rapid tests. We have to take the public health considerations very seriously, Joyce, with the variant. So the quarantining procedures to make sure that spread is reduced, these are appropriate considerations. It's 14 days versus 5 or 7. Warning Canadians ahead of time. How many people have traveled or made arrangements in the last few weeks as the Prime Minister has been speculating about this?
So, but you wouldn't have imposed an altogether travel ban? I'm trying to figure out what you would have done in a case. You are the government in waiting. Yes, you are the opposition leader, so your job is also to oppose, but you are the government.
Like, why do they say that? Your job is to oppose. What, just for the sake of opposing? Oppose what? What does that mean? Like, why do we just accept that as a political reality? It makes it, how does that serve us?
In waiting. So as the government in waiting, would you have imposed a travel ban or measures such as the Trudeau government has imposed, which is, you know, not exactly a travel ban, but sort of a travel ban?
Well, you're right. We have a role to oppose. And as government in waiting, last fall, we asked for a national rollout of rapid tests. That way, if you're following public health guidance and controlling the people coming into the country.
And they're asking for a national rollout, but they don't have a plan either. They don't know what that entails.
You can have rapid testing to do it in 5 or 7 days, not 14. How is the government going to operate this? Why are they choosing some jurisdictions and not others? That needs to be part of the plan. So we've been pushing, as you know, Joyce, since last fall for a national rollout of rapid tests. Why haven't we've seen that? We're now seeing the same slow and confused response on vaccines. We need these key tools and information so that people can follow guidance. They can restrict travel in most situations outside of essential travel, and then we can keep quarantine times down like some other countries are doing. We clearly don't have the tests, which is why Mr. Trudeau is using the 14 days.
Well, actually, my understanding is we do have some of those tests. Those tests are in the hands of the provinces, and perhaps, you know, we should ask the provinces what they're doing.
Well, and that's, you know, the big issue, right? That's what it's all leading up to. Is this chucklefuck knows exactly that that Medicare, or, you know, as we call it in Canada, well, in the United States, sorry, but I blame it on the being Pfizer today. I'm getting the Pfizer brain fog. What this chucklefuck doesn't seem to, or is conveniently forgetting, is that he should know that healthcare is primarily provincially controlled. So when the province, such as here in Ontario, gets a batch of vaccines, it is up to the province how they are administered, how they are distributed. He damn well knows that. But it's convenient that he doesn't want to mention that because the provinces that are doing the worst at it happen to be run by Conservatives.
Doing with these rapid tests. I'm totally with you on rapid tests. Where are they? Why aren't they used? Why aren't they used in schools? Why aren't they used all over the place, really? We know they're not 100% reliable, but in a pandemic, what is 100% reliable? We don't even know if these vaccines are 100% reliable. So let me...
I think maybe she's reaching to sympathize with him there, but that just felt really weird, didn't it?
Let me ask you again. You want to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Now you're in this situation where the vaccines, there's a delay in the vaccines. 78% of our Moderna shipments, instead of all of those shipments, we're seeing a terrible slowdown in the doling out of these vaccines. What would be your suggestion? What do you do in a case like this to, first of all, get these vaccines into people's arms, and then to get the confidence of people, because people are losing patience, and, you know, they're also losing confidence in politicians, and that includes yourself, sir.
Yeah.
There is a lack of confidence. I agree with you, Joyce. That's why the government has to be transparent. We've been asking for full publishing of the plan. They should actually release.
You've been asking for a published plan, but you're not, like, what are you doing to help? Other than just going, oh, you guys aren't seeming to go fast enough. Oh, gee.
The contractual
What
information
answer do you have?
about
What
when
would you
vaccine
do?
doses are coming, or at least expected, and on what timeline.
You don't have a plan.
It shifts
That's your fucking
literally
problem.
by the hours with this government. We had some very nice early vaccines to give people hope that there was a steady supply, but now they're seeing confused. They're seeing the Prime Minister change his number by the day. We see no vaccines from Pfizer this week. We see Moderna
Wait,
coming.
let's just go back a couple seconds there, because you could sort of see the exasperated sort of like her side.
But now they're seeing
like,
confused. They're
dude, why
seeing
are
the
you
Prime
just
Minister
avoiding
changes
this fucking
his
question?
number by the day. We see
Yeah, see,
no
that look right
vaccines
there,
from Pfizer this week. We see Moderna cutting. They won't make their own numbers. Let's win back that confidence. Let's get the vaccines. If I can help, I want them to succeed, we will. But information, tests, and vaccines are the three things that people need in a pandemic. And the government's opaque and sort of secretive manner is causing more worry and concern than needed.
When have you ever known a conservative to be transparent about anything? Like, not that I want to go out of my way to defend the Liberals here, but for fuck's sakes, this guy has nothing to offer, and I hope that's obvious to all Canadians. He doesn't clock to me as belligerently stupid as Doug Ford, but he's just about as useful or useless, depending on how you want to look at it. They're kind of equal in that regard. Amazing. Fucking hell. I had a couple more things I wanted to touch on, but maybe I'll have to wait till next episode, or maybe it'll just slip through the cracks, as sometimes things do that I intend to talk about because I just sort of run out of time or whatever. So to address your question there, Origami, if I get the vax, should I still wear a mask? Yes. In my humble opinion, or not so humble opinion, yes. You absolutely should continue to wear a mask. Just as a general courtesy to other people. They don't know if you're vaccinated or not. They don't know where you've been or where you came from. At least here in Toronto, in what the climate is like here in terms of COVID and how people feel about it. I think it's just a generally decent thing to do. So not even going to get into, whether that's scientifically sound or not. I don't think I really care about that in this particular instance, because, yeah, it's just the nice thing to do. Simple as that. Origami asks, if children aren't developed enough to have sex, why they should be allowed to have gender mutilation surgery. Again, much like your Hitler question about America defeating Hitler in World War II, that's flat out false and not a thing. That's just wrong. You are factually incorrect. That, not even sure why you're bringing that subject up, because it's just way fucking out of left field. But of course, I'm happy to answer them. If that's just not a thing that people do. Nobody's getting gender reassignment surgery. Pardon yourself, it's not mutilation. It's having a body that reflects what they are. And yeah, that's the answer right there. That's just not a thing that they're doing. Wherever you have read that somebody who's prepubescent is getting gender reassignment or gender affirming surgery, it's just a lie. Simple as that. I think the only instance, if memory is serving me, on where that actually is a thing, is when you is if you actually are born intersex. I think that you can get a surgery that better defines your gender at a younger age, if that's the case. But even then, I'm not 100% sure on that. I'd have to look that up again. I'm not 100% there. So yeah, that's that's, and it's so weird that that's such a pervasive lie that people seem to have in their heads about gender affirming surgery. Is that it's like, oh, why do they allow, like, no, I heard a 4-year-old was allowed to transition with surgery, and it's like, where'd you get that? Breitbart? Some weird conservative rag? Like, I just don't know where that stuff comes from. But it's the sort of like talking point and propaganda that is meant to incite your emotions about protecting children, because who doesn't want to protect children? And incite your emotions in that way to question the validity of the existence of trans people. It's essentially anti-trans propaganda. Hey, thank you, Nat. You ordered. If you've never tried Pizza Studio in Toronto, a little drop there. They don't sponsor us, but I'll I'll push them there. Pizza Studio, good stuff. So, yeah. Does that mean it's here, or did you just order it? I like how she's messaging me on the chat. Are you even home yet? I'm not sure if I heard you come in or not. Thanks, Nat. Well, I guess that's my cue to get off of here because I'm already over the hour. Yeah, honestly, Origami, your comment there can only be a compliment coming based on the questions that you've asked so far. For those of you who can't see, because it's in the YouTube chat, you may be watching on other platforms. I'm apparently so dumb it hurts. And yeah, if you've been watching me address some of the things that Origami has been asking, I mean, yeah, that's a compliment. If someone such as yourself thinks I'm dumb, that's a really great sign. So thank you for that, actually. Anyway, as always, to see you out is our Lord and Savior, the leader of Antifa, this duck. All hail. What did we name him? Did we name him something? Can't remember if we actually gave Antifa Duck a name. But there's our boy, Antifa Duck, doing his thing, passing out the George Soros checks. All right. This has been The Rough Report. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned next week, where I'm sure we will have more right-wing idiots in the chat to make fun of. Have a great day. And I'm sure the duck made you come.